The shriek that ripped through the peaceful Tuesday morning was so piercing that three birds abandoned their perch on the oak tree and a neighbor's dog started howling in sympathetic agony. Karen Westfield stood at the edge of what was, until yesterday evening, James Miller's pristine backyard swimming pool, but was now a solid sheet of ice that glistened mockingly in the winter sunlight. "What have you done?" she screeched, her blonde bob quivering with indignation as she clutched her designer tote bag filled with pool toys and laminated lesson plans. Behind her, 5 confused 6-year-olds in swimsuits and their bewildered parents huddled in the cold breath visible in the frosty December air. James leaned casually against his back door frame, sipping from a steaming mug of coffee. "Oh, good morning, Karen. Lovely day for skating, don't you think?" His voice was pleasant, almost cheerful. Karen's face transitioned through several shades of red. This is sabotage. I have a class scheduled. These children's parents have paid for swimming lessons. In my backyard pool? That's fascinating, considering I never gave permission for that," James replied, taking another sip of his coffee. "Though I did give the Henderson kids permission to use my new ice rink this afternoon. They're bringing hockey sticks." 24 hours earlier, Karen had been the picture of suburban confidence as she strode through the monthly Oak Ridge Estates Homeowners Association meeting. As the newly elected HOA president, running unopposed after she systematically demoralized every other candidate, she wielded her power like a seasoned dictator with a laminated rulebook. And finally, she announced, tapping her color-coded agenda, "The board has approved my proposal to utilize underused private amenities for community enrichment programs." James, who had been half-dozing in the back row, suddenly perked up. "What exactly does that mean, Karen?" Karen's smile was thin and dangerous. "It means, James, that since you're a single resident with a full-size pool that sits empty most of the time, the HOA has designated it as appropriate for the community children's swimming program. I'll be teaching twice-weekly lessons, starting tomorrow at 10 a.m. sharp." The room fell silent. James stood slowly. "You're saying you've commandeered my private property?" The HOA covenant clearly states in subsection 27B that the association has the right to maximize community resources, Karen replied, voice dripping with condescending sweetness. "You signed the agreement when you moved in. Perhaps you should have read the fine print." James had indeed read every word of that covenant, including the parts Karen had recently added during a suspiciously underpublicized amendment vote. He said nothing more during the meeting, just nodded thoughtfully and left early. Now, as Karen stamped her designer boot on his frozen lawn, James merely shrugged. "You know, the covenant says nothing about the state of the pool, just that it can be used for community programs. Ice skating is a wonderful winter activity." This is, Karen sputtered, looking from the ice to the shivering children. "Community enrichment," James offered helpfully. Karen's eyes narrowed to dangerous slits. "This isn't over, James. Not by a long shot." James smiled and raised his coffee mug in a toast. "I certainly hope not. I've just gotten started." Karen Westfield didn't become HOA president of Oak Ridge Estates by backing down from a fight. By Wednesday afternoon, she had convened an emergency HOA board meeting in her meticulously decorated living room, where gold-framed photographs of her various civic awards watched over the proceedings like silent sentinels. "It's vandalism on the community resource," she insisted, pacing before the 5 board members who sipped nervously at the precisely 120-degree tea she had served them. "He deliberately froze his pool to sabotage my swim program." Gerald Thompson, a retired attorney who had been reluctantly serving on the board since 2015, cleared his throat. "Technically, Karen, it's his pool, and the amendment you pushed through only specifies reasonable access for community programs, not the condition of the amenity." Karen stopped pacing and fixed Gerald with a stare that had previously caused 3 different landscaping companies to break their contracts. "Whose side are you on, Gerald?" "I'm just stating the legal. We'll need to fine him," Karen continued as if Gerald hadn't spoken. Section 12, improper maintenance of visible property features, $500 to start. Meanwhile, James wasn't idle. After converting his pool into an ice rink, a process that had involved renting industrial-grade equipment and calling in favors from a college buddy who managed a hockey arena, he had spent the morning making phone calls and researching HOA bylaws. By afternoon, he had distributed flyers throughout the neighborhood announcing free ice skating lessons for children and adults, complete with hot chocolate and cookies. The response was overwhelming. By 4 p.m., his backyard was filled with laughing children sliding across the ice while parents chatted and sipped hot drinks. James had even installed strings of twinkling lights around the rink, giving the whole scene a festive glow as dusk approached. Karen arrived precisely as the event reached its peak. She stood at the gate, clutching an official-looking envelope, her smile fixed and tight as she surveyed the scene. The laughter seemed to physically pain her. "Quite the gathering, James," she said, voice pitched to carry over the revelry. I wasn't aware you'd file for an event permit. The covenant requires approval for gatherings over 12 people. James skated over, stopping with a dramatic spray of ice. Hello, Karen. Care to join us? I have skates in all sizes. I brought you something, she said, extending the envelope. A notice of violation. James took it but didn't open it. How thoughtful. I've got something for you, too. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a folded document. A petition signed by 27 homeowners requesting a special meeting to review recent HOA amendments. Turns out many people weren't aware they'd voted to allow private property appropriation. Karen's smile never wavered, though something dangerous flashed in her eyes. This little stunt will cost you, James. Probably, he agreed cheerfully. But sometimes principles are worth paying for. Oh, and the Henderson kids wanted me to thank you. They said they much prefer skating to swimming in winter. As she turned to leave, Karen paused. You know, I admire your spirit, James. It's rare to find someone willing to fight me. Perhaps we could discuss a compromise. James tilted his head. I'm listening. Summer pool access for my program. Winter, the pool is yours. Half the summer, James countered. And I get veto power over scheduling. Karen's eyes narrowed. This discussion isn't over. I'd be disappointed if it was, James replied, watching as she marched away, already tapping furiously on her phone. By Friday, a peculiar tension had settled over Oak Ridge Estates. Residents who normally avoided eye contact suddenly found reasons to chat over mailboxes and fence lines, exchanging hushed updates on what was now being called the pool situation. Karen had always inspired a certain fear among her neighbors, but James' audacious ice rink had created the first crack in her seemingly impenetrable authority. Karen noticed the whispers. She noticed the way conversations abruptly shifted when she approached the local coffee shop. Most of all, she noticed the surprising number of signatures on James' petition, signatures from people who had always reliably voted her way or abstained entirely. This wasn't merely about a swimming program anymore. This was about control. In her home office, surrounded by binders of HOA regulations, community planning certificates, and framed thank-you letters from various neighborhood beautification projects, Karen began to strategize. She hadn't clawed her way to HOA presidency by being unprepared. The daughter of a corporate attorney and a school principal, Karen Westfield had spent her childhood learning that power came to those who knew the rules better than anyone else. Marcus, she called to her husband, who had long ago learned that peace in their marriage depended on prompt responses to that particular tone. I need you to find out everything about James Miller. Marcus appeared in the doorway, newspaper in hand. Karen, don't you think this is getting a bit? He's hiding something, Karen continued, tapping her pen against her planning notebook. Nobody stands up to me like this unless they have something to protect. Across the neighborhood, James was hosting his third ice skating session of the week. Word had spread beyond Oak Ridge Estates, and now children from surrounding communities were arriving with their parents. James watched from his deck, somewhat amazed at what he had inadvertently created. You've become quite the local hero, said a voice beside him. James turned to find Lisa Chen, a quiet neighbor who ran the community garden and had always seemed too intimidated to speak against Karen at HOA meetings. Not my intention, James admitted. I just didn't like being bullied. Lisa nodded, watching the skaters. Karen wasn't always like this, you know. When she first moved here 5 years ago, she was actually inspiring. She organized the playground renovation fundraiser and got the city to fix our flooding issues. Then something changed. James raised an eyebrow. What happened? Her renovation project for the community center was rejected by the city council. She worked on it for months. After that, she seemed determined never to lose control of anything again. Lisa sipped her hot chocolate. Some of us have been waiting for someone to stand up to her. But be careful, she doesn't fight fair. As if summoned by this warning, James's phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Check your email. You should know what you're up against. A concerned neighbor. In his inbox, James found a forwarded message chain between Karen and several HOA board members discussing not just pool regulations, but a comprehensive plan to leverage a rarely used bylaw allowing for community safety inspections of his property. She's planning a full-scale invasion, he murmured. Lisa's expression grew serious. Like I said, she doesn't fight fair, but neither should you. James looked thoughtful. I've been playing defense. Maybe it's time to go on the offensive. That evening, as Karen was reviewing her inspection checklist, she received an unexpected visitor. Gerald Thompson stood on her doorstep, looking uncomfortable. Gerald, it's after 8. What is it? I've been reviewing our HOA insurance policy, Gerald said without preamble. If someone gets injured on a property we've officially designated for community use, we're liable. All of us on the board, personally liable. Karen's confident expression faltered slightly. What are you saying? I'm saying that ice rink isn't just James' problem now. It's yours and mine and every board member's. If a child breaks an arm tomorrow, for the first time in recent memory, Karen Westfield found herself momentarily speechless. Saturday morning arrived with an unexpected development. A professional-looking sign installed at the entrance to James' yard that read Oak Ridge Estates Community Winter Recreation Area. All activities at participants' own risk, HOA approved. It was, of course, absolutely not HOA approved, and Karen nearly crashed her Mercedes into her own mailbox when she spotted it during her morning neighborhood monitoring drive. She pulled over, snapping a furious photo with her phone. The Hijacked, she hissed, typing a blistering message to the HOA board group chat, but the responses weren't what she expected. Gerald, actually, it might be best to let this one go. Given our liability concerns. Patricia, my grandkids loved skating there yesterday. Maybe we should make it official? Marcus, her own husband, honey, maybe choose your battles. Karen stared at her phone in disbelief. Was she losing her grip on the board? This simply wouldn't do. She arrived at James' door 30 minutes later, her leather portfolio clutched like a shield. James answered wearing an apron that read, "Chill out," over a cartoon snowman. Karen, what a pleasant surprise. Coffee, he offered, gesturing inside where delicious aromas wafted from his kitchen. Your sign is unauthorized and must be removed immediately, Karen stated, refusing to acknowledge the coffee offer or step inside. Furthermore, I brought the inspection notice. As per Section 18, the HOA has the right to inspect any property utilizing community programming for safety compliance. James smiled. Of course, safety first. Though you should know I've invited a reporter from the Oak Ridge Gazette to cover our community winter recreation area this afternoon. They're doing a feature on neighborhood unity during the holidays. Karen's practiced smile flickered. The local paper? They seem particularly interested in how the HOA is supporting innovative community activities. James continued, his expression innocent. I mentioned how cooperative you've been. This was a masterful move, and Karen knew it. The local paper had previously covered her successful playground renovation project, featuring a photo that still hung prominently in her home office. Being portrayed as opposing a popular community activity would damage the carefully cultivated image she built over years. I see, she said, recalculating rapidly. Well, safety inspections are standard procedure. Perhaps I could conduct it now before the reporter arrives. Absolutely, James agreed, stepping aside. And maybe we can discuss how the HOA wants to be represented in the article. The inspection was thorough but frustrating for Karen. James had somehow anticipated every potential violation. The ice was properly maintained, the perimeter secured with appropriate barriers, warning signs posted, waivers available for participants, and first aid kits prominently displayed. You've been busy, Karen observed, making a final note in her portfolio. I believe in doing things properly, James replied. Oh, and I've been meaning to ask, would the HOA consider co-sponsoring our holiday charity skate next weekend? All proceeds going to the Children's Hospital. We could put your name first on the promotional materials. Karen paused, pen hovering over paper. James had outmaneuvered her again, offering something she couldn't publicly refuse without looking heartless. I'll bring it to the board, she said carefully. As she was leaving, Karen spotted a familiar car parked across the street, Gerald Thompson's sedan. He appeared to be chatting amicably with several other neighbors, all gesturing toward James' yard with approving expressions. Are you organizing opposition against me, James? She asked suddenly, turning back to him. James' expression was surprisingly sincere. I'm not organizing anything against you, Karen. I'm just not letting you organize everything around me. For a moment, something like respect flickered across Karen's face before her professional mask returned. The board meeting is Tuesday. I expect you'll be attending? Wouldn't miss it, James replied, watching as she walked to her car with perfect posture, already typing rapidly on her phone. Tuesday's HOA meeting had to be moved from Karen's living room to the community center due to unprecedented attendance. Nearly 70 residents squeezed into the space, creating a low buzz of excitement that intensified when James entered, followed shortly by Karen, who surveyed the crowd with a carefully neutral expression. Karen opened the meeting with practiced efficiency, moving swiftly through the agenda items until reaching new business, when Gerald unexpectedly raised his hand. I'd like to propose a motion to officially designate James Miller's backyard ice rink as a sanctioned HOA winter recreation area with appropriate insurance coverage and shared maintenance costs. Karen's smile became rigid. That item isn't on the agenda, Gerald. I believe under Procedure 7B, any board member can introduce urgent community matters, Gerald countered, unexpectedly assertive. The holiday charity skate is this weekend. It seems urgent to resolve the status. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the room. Karen felt the control of her meeting slipping away. Perhaps we should table this discussion until next month and we can properly. I second the motion, called Patricia, another board member who had never previously contradicted Karen. Karen's fingers tightened around her gavel. Fine, we'll open the floor for 5 minutes of discussion, then vote. What followed was the most animated HOA discussion in Oak Ridge Estates history. Resident after resident stood to praise the ice rink's community benefits. Parents described their children's joy, seniors appreciated the adult-only morning sessions James had added, and several people pointed out the positive attention from the newspaper article, which had depicted Oak Ridge Estates as a model of innovative community spirit. Throughout the discussion, Karen sat perfectly still, her expression unreadable as she watched years of carefully accumulated neighborhood control publicly erode. When James finally spoke, his words were surprisingly conciliatory. I want to acknowledge that Karen's original intention, creating more community access to private amenities, wasn't wrong, he said. My issue was with the implementation, not the goal. I'd like to propose that if we formalize the winter recreation area, we also establish a fair process for summer pool usage that respects both community needs and homeowner rights. The room erupted in applause. Karen stared at James, her eyes narrowing. Yet not only challenged her authority, but was now co-opting her vision while appearing magnanimous. When the vote came, it was nearly unanimous in favor of Gerald's motion, with only Karen abstaining. As the meeting adjourned, residents clustered around James with congratulations and questions about the charity event, while Karen methodically packed her materials into her portfolio. James eventually made his way to her. Good meeting, he offered. Enjoy your victory, Karen replied, voice low. But understand something, James. I've invested 5 years in this community. 5 years of thankless work, countless hours of planning and problem-solving that these people have already forgotten. You've been here, what, 18 months? You have no idea what it takes to actually build something lasting. For the first time, James glimpsed something beneath Karen's controlled exterior, genuine hurt and perhaps even a touch of betrayal. Before he could respond, she brushed past him and exited the building. The following morning, an email arrived in all Oak Ridge residents' inboxes. Effective immediately, I am resigning as HOA president and board member. My vision for our community clearly no longer aligns with the majority. I wish you all well. Karen Westfield. By afternoon, Karen's impeccably maintained front yard displayed a for sale sign sending shockwaves through the neighborhood. Nobody had expected this nuclear option, Karen Westfield actually leaving Oak Ridge Estates. James stood on his driveway, staring at the sign with an unexpected sense of hollowness in what should have been a moment of triumph. The holiday charity skate was a resounding success, raising over $5,000 for the Children's Hospital. Local businesses donated prizes, a professional photographer captured the event, and even the mayor made an appearance. Everyone agreed it was Oak Ridge Estates' most successful community event in years. Everyone except James, who found himself repeatedly glancing toward Karen's house throughout the festivities. The for sale sign stood like an accusation, and Karen herself remained conspicuously absent, her curtains drawn despite the neighborhood activity just 2 doors down. You should be celebrating, Lisa Chen told him, handing him a cup of hot cider. This is all because of you. It doesn't feel right, James admitted. I never meant to drive her away. Karen drives herself, Lisa replied. Always has. After the event, as volunteers helped clean up, James made a decision. With a container of leftover cookies in hand, he walked to Karen's house and rang the doorbell. No answer came, though he could see lights on inside. He tried again, then called out. Karen, it's James. Can we talk? The door opened abruptly. Karen stood there in what might have been the most shocking sight yet in their ongoing neighborhood drama. She wore sweatpants and an oversized sweater, her hair pulled back in a simple ponytail, no makeup. The immaculately put-together HOA president was nowhere to be seen. What do you want? She asked flatly. Come to gloat. I brought cookies, he said lamely, holding out the container. And I want to say I'm sorry about how things turned out. I never intended for you to leave the neighborhood. Karen laughed, a short, humorless sound. Of course you did. You wanted me gone from the moment I tried to use your pool. I wanted you off my back, James corrected, not out of Oak Ridge. Karen studied him for a moment, then stepped aside. You might as well come in. The interior of Karen's home was revealing, immaculate, and beautifully decorated, but with a surprising number of community service awards and framed thank you letters from neighborhood projects. Photos showed Karen at various ribbon cuttings and fundraisers, always perfectly dressed and smiling. Marcus left yesterday, she said abruptly, gesturing toward conspicuously empty spaces on shelves where items had been removed. He said he'd been waiting years for someone to stand up to me, and when someone finally did, he realized he should have been the first. James stood awkwardly, still holding the cookies. I'm sorry. You systematically dismantled everything I've built in this neighborhood over the past month. That's not true, James protested. The rink was just about my property rights. It was never just about the pool, Karen said, sitting heavily on her pristine white sofa. It was about challenging me. And once you did it successfully, everyone else felt empowered to do the same. For the first time, James saw Karen clearly, not as the neighborhood tyrant, but as someone who had invested herself completely in creating order in her surroundings, perhaps because other aspects of her life felt disordered. "Why are you selling your house?" he asked. "Because I failed," she answered simply. "I couldn't maintain control of the one thing I thought I was good at." James sat down opposite her. "You didn't fail. You've actually built something valuable. The community engagement, the processes, the infrastructure. You created all of that. Maybe your methods needed adjusting, but your accomplishments are real." Karen looked genuinely surprised by his words. "You're the last person I expected to hear that from." "I can disagree with how you do things and still respect what you've achieved," James said. "And honestly, the HOA needs someone with your organizational skills. It just needs to be tempered with a little more flexibility." Something shifted in Karen's expression, a softening around the eyes, a slight relaxation of her defensive posture. "Why are you really here, James?" "To ask you not to sell your house," he replied honestly, "and to see if we can find a better way forward." Part 7. Thaw. 3 weeks later, the Oak Ridge Estates Community Center hosted another packed meeting, but the atmosphere was markedly different. James and Karen stood together at the front of the room presenting a jointly developed proposal for community resource sharing guidelines. "The key principles," Karen explained, pointing to a meticulously prepared slide, "are voluntary participation, fair compensation, and transparent scheduling. No homeowner would be required to share private amenities, but those who choose to would receive either HOA fee reductions or direct payment." James nodded. "We've created a balanced approach that respects private property rights while expanding community access to pools, workshops, large gardens, and other amenities that often sit unused." The transformation in their public dynamic had been the neighborhood's primary gossip topic since Karen had withdrawn her house from the market and appeared unexpectedly at the ice rink one evening, clipboard in hand, to formally document safety protocols. James had initially been suspicious, but her genuine interest in creating legitimate processes had gradually convinced him of her sincerity. Their unlikely alliance had confused everyone, especially Gerald, who had anticipated becoming the new HOA president, only to find himself outmaneuvered when Karen and James jointly proposed a restructured board with shared leadership responsibilities. "We're suggesting a 3-person executive committee rather than a single president," Karen continued, "to ensure diverse perspectives in decision-making. And term limits," James added, "to prevent any one vision from dominating too long." As they fielded questions from residents, the contrast in their styles became apparent yet complementary. Karen provided detailed procedural answers while James translated complex regulations into accessible explanations. They disagreed occasionally but did so respectfully, modeling a new approach to neighborhood governance. After the meeting, as they gathered their materials, Gerald approached them. "I don't know what game you two are playing," he said quietly, "but this partnership won't last. Some people don't change their fundamental nature." Karen smiled thinly. "You're right, Gerald. I haven't changed my fundamental nature. I still care about order, regulations, and community standards. I've just found a more effective way to implement them. And I still believe in individual rights and flexibility," James added. "We've just found a better balance between structure and freedom." Gerald looked unconvinced as he walked away. Karen turned to James with a raised eyebrow. "He's not entirely wrong, and we're still fundamentally different people." "That's the point," James replied. "The neighborhood needs both perspectives." Later that evening, they sat on James's deck overlooking the ice rink, which now displayed a proper sign with insurance information and scheduled hours, all meticulously documented in a binder Karen had created. "Marcus called today," Karen said suddenly. "He wants to reconcile." "That's good news, isn't it?" James asked. Karen's expression was complicated. "Is it? He left when I was at my lowest. Now he wants to return when I'm finding my footing again." "What are you going to do?" "I told him I needed time," she replied. The old Karen would have either immediately taken him back or immediately rejected him, both reactions based on maintaining control. "I'm trying something different now." James nodded, understanding the significance of this shift. "Progress." "Small steps," Karen agreed, looking out at the rink where several teenagers were playing an informal hockey game. "Though I still think a pool is a more practical year-round amenity than an ice rink." James laughed. Some things never change. What neither mentioned was the unexpected friendship that had developed between them. Two people who had initially despised each other discovering a reluctant respect that had evolved into genuine appreciation. The neighborhood watched their alliance with fascination, waiting to see whether it would implode or transform Oak Ridge Estates permanently. Spring arrived in Oak Ridge Estates, bringing with it cherry blossoms, daffodils, and the methodical dismantling of James' ice rink. As March temperatures rose, the frozen surface gradually returned to its original state. A swimming pool, now surrounded by a properly permitted fence with a coded lock system that Karen had insisted upon. The community resource sharing program had been implemented with unexpected success. 3 other homeowners had volunteered their pools for limited summer access, a retired carpenter offered his workshop for weekend classes, and the Chen family opened their elaborate garden for monthly community dinners. Karen, who had not reconciled with Marcus, he had ultimately moved to Phoenix with a yoga instructor half his age, had channeled her organizational energy into creating immaculate scheduling systems and liability waivers. She remained formidable, but had developed a capacity for compromise that surprised everyone, especially herself. First swim test session today, Karen announced, arriving at James' backyard with a clipboard and stopwatch. She wore a sensible one-piece swimsuit under a cover-up, her hair tucked into a practical swim cap. James, who was skimming leaves from the recently refilled pool, looked up with amusement. "I still can't believe I agreed to this." 20% reduction in your HOA fees, Karen reminded him. "And I've limited the lessons to Tuesdays and Thursdays as agreed in Section 3, Paragraph 2 of our arrangement." James shook his head, smiling. "You know, normal friends don't cite paragraph numbers in conversation." "Are we friends, James?" Karen asked with unexpected directness. The question hung between them, complicated by months of conflict, collaboration, and gradually building trust. Before James could answer, the first swimming students arrived, the same children who had stood shivering in his yard months ago, now excited for actual swimming rather than an ice skating alternative. "Mr. Miller, Ms. Westfield said you're teaching diving today," called out 8-year-old Emma Henderson, dragging her mother along. "Is she now?" James raised an eyebrow at Karen, who shrugged innocently. "You mentioned you were on your college swim team. It seemed a waste not to utilize your expertise," Karen said. "It's in the schedule." James laughed and turned to Emma. "Well, if it's in Ms. Westfield's schedule, it must be happening." As more families arrived, James found himself genuinely enjoying the preparations. The backyard filled with children's voices and parents chatting comfortably, a far cry from the tense confrontation that had occurred in the same space during winter. Karen efficiently organized the children into age groups, her natural commanding presence perfect for maintaining order among excited kids. James demonstrated basic diving techniques, discovering an unexpected pleasure in teaching. They moved around each other with the ease of people who had found a comfortable rhythm of collaboration. Later, as the lesson concluded and families departed, Karen and James sat on the pool deck, feet dangling in the water. "To answer your question from earlier," James said, "yes, I think we are friends. Unlikely friends, but friends nonetheless." Karen nodded, looking out over the pool. "I've never been good at friendship. Too controlling," Marcus always said. "You're getting better at it," James offered, "though you did schedule me for diving lessons without asking." "Force of habit," Karen admitted with a small smile. "I'm working on it." A comfortable silence settled between them, broken when Gerald Thompson appeared at the gate, looking characteristically disgruntled. "Emergency situation at the community center," he announced. "The new irrigation system is malfunctioning. Water everywhere." Karen was immediately on her feet. "Did you shut off the main valve?" "I don't know where it is," Gerald admitted. "I'll handle it," Karen stated, already gathering her things with efficient movements. "James, can you collect the pool toys and lock up?" "Already on it," James replied, having learned that emergencies brought out the best in Karen's organizational abilities. As they headed toward the community center together, neighbors watched the unlikely pair with interest. Rumors had circulated for months about the nature of their relationship, theories ranging from a calculated power alliance to something more personal developing between them. The truth was both simpler and more complex. They had discovered that their differences, which had initially driven them to conflict, could become complementary strengths when directed towards shared goals. Karen's attention to detail balanced James's flexible approach. His creativity tempered her rigidity. "You know," James said as they walked, "the summer program is going well, but I've been thinking about next winter." Karen gave him a sideways glance. "Please don't tell me you're planning another ice rink." "Actually," James replied with a grin, "I was thinking bigger. The community center parking lot has that perfect gentle slope, with the right permits and safety measures. A neighborhood ice skating area?" Karen finished his thought, already mentally calculating logistics. "That would require significant insurance considerations, not to mention city approval." "So that's a maybe?" James asked, knowing her well enough now to recognize the planning calculations happening behind her eyes. Karen's lips curved into a small smile. "It's a let me create a proposal with proper documentation. But yes, it's a maybe." As they hurried toward the latest neighborhood crisis, neighbors watching their animated conversation wondered if Oak Ridge Estates would ever return to its quiet, predictable past. But most agreed that the community had become something more vibrant, more connected, and certainly more interesting since the day Karen Westfield had discovered her commandeered swimming pool transformed into an ice rink. Sometimes it seemed the coldest conflicts could lead to the warmest resolutions, especially when neighborhood nemesis discovered they made better allies than enemies.